Don't let him see me," she pleaded. Mafia boss pinned her to the alley wall and kissed her deeply. The Brooklyn night did not smell like rain. It smelled of stale beer, exhaust fumes, and the metallic tang of fear that coated the back of Elena Marquez's throat. She moved not with the grace of a woman out for a Friday evening, but with the frantic, jagged steps of prey, realizing the hunter had cut off the exit. Her heels clicked against the uneven pavement of the alleyway, a sharp staccato rhythm that sounded too loud in the narrow space. She kicked them off. The cold, slick concrete bit into her stockinged feet, but silence was worth the pain. She clutched her purse to her chest, her knuckles white, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that she tried desperately to stifle. She was 24 years old, but in the shadows of the warehouse district, she felt like a child again, trembling in a closet while voices raised in anger shook the walls. Elena pressed herself into the recess of a brick wall, behind a rusted dumpster overflowing with the refuse of the nightclub that pulsed with bass music a block away. She squeezed her eyes shut. Please let him keep walking. Please let him turn the corner. A silhouette appeared at the mouth of the alley. It was not the man she feared, but it was dangerous nonetheless. A large black SUV, polished to a mirror shine that seemed out of place among the grime and graffiti, rolled silently to a stop at the curb. The engine purred with a low, menacing rumble, a sound of contained power, inside the vehicle. Dante Moretti adjusted the cuffs of his Italian suit. He had spent the last 3 hours negotiating a truce between 2 rival syndicates over shipping routes in the harbor, and his patience was frayed. He wanted silence. He wanted a glass of scotch aged longer than most of his soldiers had been alive. But then he saw her. Dante had survived 35 years in a life where a single moment of distraction meant a closed casket funeral. He noticed everything. He noticed the way the shadows moved differently near the dumpster. He noticed the pale shimmer of bare legs and the terrifying rigidity of a human figure trying to become invisible. "Stop," Dante commanded. The driver, a man named Marco whose neck was as thick as a tree trunk, hit the brakes immediately. "Boss, wait here." Dante opened the door. The air outside was brisk, biting through the warmth of the car's interior. He stepped onto the pavement, his movements fluid and unhurried. He did not look like a man who belonged in an alley. He looked like a king surveying a very dirty part of his kingdom. He walked toward the darkness. He did not call out. He simply encroached upon the space until the woman hiding there had no choice but to acknowledge him. Elena looked up, her eyes wide and dark, reflecting the scant street lamplight. She saw a man who towered over 6 feet, with shoulders that blocked out the world and a face carved from granite and cold intent. He was handsome, but in the way a wolf is handsome, terrifyingly so. She gasped, stepping back, but her heel hit the brick wall. There was nowhere to go. "You are a long way from the taxi stand," Dante said, his voice a deep baritone that seemed to vibrate in the damp air. Before Elena could answer, footsteps echoed from the main street. Heavy boots, purposeful. The color drained from Elena's face so completely that Dante thought she might faint. She lunged forward, not attacking him, but reaching for him. Her cold hands gripped the lapels of his expensive jacket, bunching the fabric. "Don't let him see me," she whispered. Her voice was a fractured thing, broken by terror. "Please, don't let him see me." Dante looked past her. A man was turning the corner. Even from this distance, Dante recognized the type. Shaved head, neck tattoos that spoke of prison time, a gait that suggested he was carrying a weapon tucked into his waistband. He was scanning the street, hunting. Dante made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. He did not push her away. Instead, he moved with a sudden, predatory speed. He spun Elena around and slammed her back against the brick wall, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to shock the air out of her lungs. He stepped into her space, his body a solid wall of heat and muscle, effectively burying her small frame between the hard brick and his broad chest. "Stay still," he murmured against her hair. The man with the tattooed neck stopped at the mouth of the alley. He squinted into the gloom, looking for a terrified girl running for her life. What he saw instead was a couple lost in the throes of passion, hidden away in the shadows of the city. Dante brought one hand up to cup the back of Elena's head, his fingers tangling in her dark hair to hold her steady. He lowered his face to hers. She was trembling so violently he could feel the vibrations through his suit. "Play the part," he breathed, his lips brushing hers. Then he closed the distance. It was meant to be a deception, a piece of theater to fool a thug. Dante pressed his mouth to hers, intending a dry, firm pressure that would look convincing from 20 feet away. But the moment their lips met, the script dissolved. Elena gasped against his mouth, and Dante tasted the sweetness of her breath mixed with the salt of a tear that had escaped her eye. She was soft, incredibly soft, and the contrast of her fragility against the violence of the night ignited something primal deep in his gut. He groaned low in his throat, the sound involuntary. He deepened the kiss, tilting her head back. His other hand found her waist, pulling her flush against him. It wasn't gentle, and yet it was the safest she had felt in 2 years. His mouth moved over hers with a commanding, possessive rhythm, demanding a response. Elena's hands, which had been pushing weakly against his chest, curled into fists against his shirt. She didn't push him away. She held on. For a few seconds, the fear of the man with the tattoo vanished, replaced by a different kind of intensity, a storm of heat and sandalwood and raw, masculine power. The footsteps at the end of the alley lingered for a moment longer, then turned and faded away. The hunter had moved on, convinced there was no prey here, only lovers. Dante pulled back slowly. He did not step away immediately. He stayed close, his forehead resting against hers, their breath mingling in white puffs in the cold air. His heart was beating harder than it had in years. Elena stared up at him, her eyes dazed, her lips swollen and red. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on her. She was standing in a filthy alley, pinned against a wall by a man whose suit cost more than her entire life's earnings. A man who tasted like danger and salvation all at once. She shoved him. It was a weak shove, but Dante allowed it, stepping back to give her space. Her voice failed her. She looked at his dark eyes, then at the mouth that had just claimed hers. "I have to go." She scrambled to grab her shoes, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped them. She didn't put them on. She just clutched them and bolted toward the street, running in the opposite direction of the tattooed man. Dante watched her go. He reached up and touched his lower lip with his thumb. He could still taste her. He walked back to the SUV and slid into the back seat. "Drive," he said. "Where to, boss?" Marco asked, eyeing him in the rearview mirror. "Follow her," Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his mind was racing. "Do not let her see you. I want to know where she sleeps. I want to know who she is running from, and I want to know why she tastes like trouble." The Starlight Motel was the kind of place where people went when they wanted to disappear, or when they had simply run out of road. The neon sign flickered with a dying buzz. The letter L burned out, so it read, Starlight Moat. Elena locked the door of room 12 and threw the deadbolt. Then she wedged a wooden chair under the handle. Only then did she allow herself to slide down the door until she hit the stained carpet. She buried her face in her knees and wept. She cried silently, a habit learned from living with a monster who hated the sound of tears. When the shaking finally stopped, she reached into her purse and pulled out a cheap plastic burner phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. It was risky. Every call was a risk. But she had to know. She dialed the number. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" A frantic, hushed voice answered. "Rosa," Elena whispered. "It's me, Elena." "Oh, God, are you okay? Victor was here. He was screaming. He tore the apartment apart looking for—" "Listen to me," Elena cut her off, her voice trembling but fierce. "Do not come to the city. Do not go to the usual spot. He knows. I don't know how, but he knows. Where are you?" "I'm safe," Elena lied. "I'm at a motel. I'm leaving in the morning. I'm going to get a bus ticket to Ohio, or maybe further. I'll send it to you when I'm clear." "Elena, he's crazy. He's talking about people. Powerful people. He says you stole something. I didn't steal anything, Rosa. I just left. That's the only crime I committed. I left him. He says you have the ledger." Elena's blood ran cold. "I don't have anything. I have $20 and a bag of clothes. Stay with your sister. Don't go out. Throw your phone away after this call. Elena, do it. Rosa, I love you." Elena ended the call and immediately popped the back off the phone, pulling the battery out. She sat in the dim light of the motel room, the silence pressing in on her ears, the ledger. She didn't have it, but she knew what it was. Victor had kept a small black book of names, dates, and payoffs. If he thought she had it, he wouldn't just kill her. He would torture her first. 2 hours later, across the bridge in Manhattan, Dante sat in his private office above the masquerade club he owned. The room was soundproof, smelling of leather and expensive cigars. Luca, his lieutenant, placed a thin manila folder on the mahogany desk. Luca was sharp-featured, loyal to a fault, and capable of finding a needle in a haystack if the needle owed Dante money. "Her name is Elena Marquez," Luca said. "She's a waitress, or was. I worked at a diner in Queens until 2 days ago. No family in the city except a cousin, Rosa. But here is the interesting part." Dante swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I am listening. She was living with Victor Salas." Dante's hand stopped moving. The ice in his glass clinked once, a sharp sound in the quiet room. "Salas." "The very same." Luca nodded. "Mid-level pusher, violent, ambitious, and stupid. He turned informant 3 weeks ago. The feds squeezed him on a distribution charge, and he started singing. He has crossed 3 syndicates, including ours. There was a green light on his head." Dante opened the folder. There was a photo of Elena, grainy, taken from a distance. She looked happy in the photo, smiling at something off camera. It looked nothing like the terrified creature he had held in the alley, and yet the eyes were the same. "She is the girlfriend of a rat," Dante said quietly. "Ex-girlfriend, from the looks of it," Luca corrected. "Word on the street is, she ran. Salas is tearing the city apart looking for her. He's claiming she took something of his leverage." Dante looked at the photo again. He remembered the feel of her body pressed against his, the desperate way she had clung to his lapels. "Don't let him see me. She wasn't running from the law. She was running from Salas." "Where is she?" Dante asked. "A dump in Brooklyn. The Starlight Motel. Room 12. My guys are watching the perimeter." Dante stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Get the car." Luca blinked. "Boss, you want me to bring her in?" "No," Dante said, walking to the door. "I'm going to get her myself." The knock on the door was not aggressive, but it was heavy. It was the knock of someone who did not expect to be kept waiting. Elena woke with a start, clutching the thin blanket to her chin. She stared at the door. The chair was still wedged under the handle. "Elena Marquez," a voice came through the wood. It was deep, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. She didn't answer. She scrambled out of bed, fully dressed, and looked toward the bathroom window. It was too small to climb through. "I am not here to hurt you," the voice said, "but the man following you is—" "Open the door, Elena." She recognized the voice, the man from the alley, the man who had kissed her as if he owned the air she breathed. Trembling, she moved the chair. She unlocked the deadbolt with shaking fingers and opened the door 3 inches, keeping the security chain on. Dante Moretti stood in the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting hollow shadows on his face. He looked out of place in the peeling corridor, like a panther pacing in a cardboard box. "You," she whispered. "Open the door." Dante said, "Who are you?" "I am the man who kept you alive tonight, and if you want to see the sunrise, you will let me in." Elena hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, to trust no one, but when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see the manic cruelty she saw in Victor. She saw a cold, hard resolve. She slid the chain off and opened the door. Dante stepped inside. He didn't look around the room. His focus was entirely on her. He closed the door behind him and locked it. "Victor Salas is a dead man walking," Dante said without preamble. "He has turned informant. Half the city is hunting him. If he finds you, he will use you as a shield or a bargaining chip. You understand this?" Elena hugged her arms around herself. "I left him. I don't know anything about his business." "He thinks you do," Dante said. He took a step closer. "You are on borrowed time. Elena, you have no money, no resources, and you are hiding in a motel that has paper-thin walls and a lock a child could pick. Let me keep you breathing." "Why?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why do you care? Who are you?" "My name is Dante Moretti." Elena stopped breathing. She knew the name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the name. The Moretti crime family ran the docks, the unions, and the clubs. They were royalty, and they were lethal. You're one of them." She backed away until her legs hit the edge of the bed. I can't trade one devil for another." "I am not a devil," Dante said softly, though his eyes glinted. "But I am very good at killing them." "Get out," she whispered. "Please, just leave me alone." Dante watched her for a long moment. He saw the terror, the exhaustion, the way she was barely holding herself together. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it on the scarred dresser. "I will have men outside," he said. "If you change your mind, call." He turned to the door. Elena watched him go, her heart hammering against her ribs. She waited until the latch clicked, then rushed to lock it again. She turned back to the room, her eyes scanning the space, looking for anything she might have missed, checking the corners. Then she saw it. On the wall above the bed, carved into the cheap floral wallpaper, were fresh, jagged letters. The plaster dust was still settling on the pillow. It hadn't been there when she checked in. Someone had been in the room while she was in the bathroom earlier, or perhaps before she arrived, waiting. The message was simple. "Found you." A scream died in her throat. She stumbled back, hand over her mouth. He had been here, or one of his people. They knew where she was. They were playing with her. She grabbed her purse. She didn't pack. She didn't look back. She unlocked the door and threw it open, running out into the hallway. Dante was just stepping into the elevator at the end of the hall. The doors were sliding shut. "Wait!" Elena screamed. Sprinting down the corridor, Dante's hand shot out, stopping the doors from closing. He looked at her, seeing the absolute terror in her eyes, the way her face was ashen. She crashed into him, burying her face in his chest, gripping his coat with desperate strength. "Take me with you," she sobbed into his shirt. "Please, just take me out of here." Dante looked down at her. He wrapped one arm around her, pulling her tight against him. He looked at the open hallway, his eyes narrowing as he scanned for threats. "You are safe," he said, his voice low and final. "I have you." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing them in together. "Just for tonight," Elena whispered, shaking. "Just for tonight." Dante looked at his reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors, seeing the girl clinging to him and the darkness in his own eyes. He knew, with a certainty that settled heavy in his bones, that it would be for much longer than tonight. "Just for tonight," he lied. Elena woke to a silence so profound it felt heavy. Her eyes flew open, panic seizing her chest before her mind could catch up to the present. She was not in the damp, peeling room of the Starlight Motel. She was not in the cramped apartment she had shared with Victor, where the smell of stale smoke and fear permeated the drywall. She was lying in a bed that felt like a cloud, wrapped in sheets of Egyptian cotton that were cool against her skin. The ceiling above her was high, pristine white, and edged with crown molding. Elena sat up, clutching the duvet to her chest. Light streamed in through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. It was a view that cost millions, a view that belonged to masters of the universe. She was in the penthouse of Dante Moretti. She slid out of bed, her bare feet sinking into plush carpet. She was still wearing her clothes from the night before, jeans and a wrinkled blouse, which made her feel gritty and out of place in the sterile, cold luxury of the room. The furniture was modern, sharp-angled, and dark. There were no personal photos, no trinkets, nothing to suggest a human being lived here rather than a machine that appreciated Italian leather. Elena moved to the door and opened it cautiously. The hallway was just as imposing. She followed the scent of espresso, her stomach tightening with a mix of hunger and dread. She found him in the kitchen. Dante stood by a marble island, reading a newspaper spread out before him. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a watch that likely cost more than her father's house. He looked calm, almost domestic, but the gun resting on the counter next to his coffee cup destroyed the illusion. He didn't look up, yet he spoke the moment she entered. "There is coffee in the pot. Cups are in the cabinet to your left." Elena froze. She tried to summon a mask of indifference, the same mask she had worn for 2 years to survive Victor, but her hands were trembling. She walked to the cabinet, her movements stiff. "I can't stay here," she said, her voice raspy from sleep. "Thank you for last night, but I have to go." Dante turned a page of the newspaper. "Go where?" "Back to the motel. My men found 3 more carvings on the exterior wall this morning. Salas have eyes everywhere." Elena gripped the ceramic mug, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "I will leave the city. I will go west. Victor Salas has sold information to the Russians and the Albanians," Dante said, finally looking up. His dark eyes locked onto hers, stripping away her defenses. "He is desperate. He needs leverage to buy his way into witness protection or to pay off his debts. You are that leverage. If you step out that door alone, you will be in the trunk of a car within the hour." Elena set the cup down with a clatter. "Why do you care? You are a crime boss. You are exactly like him, just with better suits." Dante's expression hardened. He folded the newspaper deliberately. "I'm nothing like him." "You kill people," she shot back, the adrenaline of fear making her bold. "You run rackets. You threaten people." "I do," Dante admitted, his voice dropping an octave. "But I have a code. Men like Salas possess no code. They are rabid dogs." He walked around the island, closing the distance between them until he stood only a foot away. The air in the room seemed to shift, becoming charged and heavy. "Why are you really running, Elena? It is not just because he turned informant. You ran before that." Elena looked away, staring at the polished granite floor. The memory clawed at her throat, suffocating her. She wanted to lie. She wanted to tell him it was just a bad breakup, that she was tired of the yelling. But the way Dante looked at her, steady, unblinking, like he could see the scars beneath her shirt, made lying impossible. "He changed," she whispered. "He was always rough, but he started getting darker. He started bringing girls around, young ones, runaways." Dante went perfectly still. "Trafficking." Elena nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I found a ledger. I saw the names. Then I saw my cousin's name, Rosa. She's only 19. He was grooming her. Dante. He was going to sell her to cover a gambling debt." She took a shuddering breath. "I confronted him. I tried to take the book. That was when he—" She touched her ribs unconsciously. "He beat me until I couldn't stand. He told me if I ever spoke, he would make sure Rosa disappeared forever. So I waited until he passed out, and I ran. I called Rosa and told her to hide, but I couldn't get the book." The silence that followed was terrifying. Dante did not shout. He did not throw anything, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. His eyes, usually a dark, unreadable brown, burned with a cold, lethal fury. It wasn't just anger at the violation of the law. Dante had zero tolerance for those who harmed women and children, but a personal, searing rage at the thought of this woman, standing so small and broken in his kitchen, being beaten by a coward. "He broke your ribs," Dante stated, not asking. "2 of them," Elena replied softly. "And my nose." Dante reached out. Elena flinched, expecting a blow. He stopped his hand in midair, waiting until she opened her eyes and saw that he wasn't striking her. Slowly, with agonizing gentleness, he reached forward and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone, his skin rough but warm. "He is a dead man," Dante said. The promise in his voice was absolute. He turned away abruptly, as if the contact burned him, and poured her a cup of tea from a second pot on the stove. He placed it in her hands. "Drink. You need your strength." The day passed in a blur of tension. Dante did not leave the penthouse. He worked from a laptop in the living room, his phone buzzing incessantly. Elena paced the perimeter of the apartment, feeling like a bird trapped in a glass cage. Late in the afternoon, the sun began to dip, casting long orange shadows across the city. Elena stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was brisk, whipping her hair across her face. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking down at the dizzying drop to the street below. From up here, the people looked like ants. The danger felt distant, abstract. The sliding door opened behind her. Dante stepped out. He had shed his tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. He held 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her without a word. They stood in silence, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. A sea of diamonds against the velvet dark. "Do you ever get afraid?" Elena asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Living like this? Knowing someone always wants to take what you have?" Dante took a sip of wine. "Fear is a tool. If you do not feel it, you are careless. If you let it control you, you are dead." He turned to look at her. The wind pressed her blouse against her frame, highlighting the curve of her waist. She looked ethereal and tragic against the backdrop of the skyline. "I'm afraid all the time," Elena confessed. "I used to be brave. I think he took that from me." "He took nothing that cannot be regrown," Dante said firmly. He set his glass down on the railing and stepped closer. "Look at me." Elena turned her head. The intensity in his gaze pinned her in place. "You walked into an alley to hide from a monster," he said slowly. "You stood up to me in my own kitchen. You are not weak. Elena, you are surviving." He reached out, his large hand cupping the side of her face. His thumb brushed her lower lip, dragging slightly. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core, shocking her. It wasn't the possessive, painful grip of Victor. It was a touch of reverence. Elena's breath hitched. She should pull away. She should run, but her body betrayed her. She leaned into his palm, her eyes fluttering shut. "Dante," she breathed. He made a low sound in his throat, stepping into her space until her back pressed against the glass railing. He lowered his head and kissed her. This was not the performance from the alley. There was no audience here. This was hunger. His lips moved over hers, firm and demanding, tasting of red wine and danger. Elena gasped, her hands finding purchase on his chest, gripping his shirt. The heat of him was overwhelming. He felt solid, immovable, a fortress against the cold wind. His hand slid from her face down the column of her neck, resting on her shoulder before trailing down her spine. He pulled her flush against him. She could feel the hard wall of his chest, the rapid beat of his heart echoing her own. For a moment, the world fell away. There was no solace, no ledger, no fear. There was only the taste of him and the rough slide of his tongue against hers. But then his hand drifted lower, resting on her hip, squeezing slightly. The sensation triggered a memory. Victor's hand in the same spot, just before he shoved her into a wall. Elena gasped and wrenched herself back, stumbling. The wine in her glass sloshed over the rim, staining her hand red like blood. "I can't," she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. I can't do this." Dante stood perfectly still, his chest heaving slightly. He didn't reach for her. He didn't look angry. He looked regretful. "I apologize," he said stiffly. "I moved too fast." "It's not you," Elena whispered, though she wasn't sure if that was true. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what is real." She turned and fled back inside, leaving him alone on the balcony with the wind and the half-empty glasses. Dante stayed outside for a long time. When he finally came in, the apartment was dark. He walked to his study and picked up his secure phone. "Luca," he said when the line connected. "Boss, we have a lead on Salas's safe house in the Bronx." "Good, burn it," Dante said, his voice ice cold. "But before you do, I want 4 men in the penthouse, 2 in the lobby, 2 on the roof, rotation every 6 hours. 4 men? Luca sounded surprised. "For the girl. Boss, she's just a witness. We can stash her in a safe house in Jersey." "She stays here," Dante snapped. "She's not just a witness." "Boss, with respect." Luca's voice lowered. "You are getting involved. If the other families smell weakness, she is not a weakness. Dante cut him off. She is under my protection. If anyone touches her, Salas, the Russians, or one of our own, I will peel the skin from their bones. Do you understand? Understood. Dante. Dante hung up. He rubbed his temples. Luca was right. He was compromising himself. He should send her away. But the thought of her out there, alone, defenseless against the wolves, made his blood turn to acid. He was beginning to see her not as a stray he had rescued, but as something vital, something he hadn't known he was missing. In the hallway, pressed against the wall, Elena held her breath. She had come to apologize, but she had stopped when she heard his voice. Burn it. Peel the skin from their bones. The violence in his tone was casual, practiced. It was the voice of a killer. She backed away silently, her heart sinking. She had told herself he was different, but he wasn't. He was just a more powerful version of the monster she had escaped. Night settled over the penthouse like a shroud. Elena lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor's face, then Dante's face, blurring together until she couldn't tell them apart. She needed to know. She needed to look him in the eye and know if she was safe, or if she was just a pet he would discard when he was bored. She found a silk robe in the closet, black, sleek, likely belonging to a woman who hadn't stayed long. She tied it tight around her waist, shielding herself, and walked barefoot down the hall. A strip of light showed under the door of the master bedroom. She pushed the door open. Dante was sitting on the edge of his massive bed, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had stripped down to his trousers. His chest was bare, a map of scars and muscle. There was a long, jagged line running from his shoulder to his pectoral, a knife wound, old and faded. A bullet grazed on his ribs. He looked up as she entered. His eyes widened slightly, taking in the sight of her in the silk robe, her hair disheveled, her feet bare. "Elena," he said, his voice rough, "you should be sleeping." "I heard you," she said, stepping into the room. "On the phone. Talking about burning houses and skinning men." Dante set the glass down on the nightstand. "I speak the language they understand. It is the only way to keep them away from you." "Is it?" She walked closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "Or is it just what you do? Are you going to hurt me one day? Dante, when I disobey? When will I stop being interested?" Dante stood up slowly. He moved around the bed until he was standing in front of her. He did not touch her. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She looked. "I have done terrible things," he said. "I will not lie to you. My hands are not clean. But I have never hurt a woman. And I would cut off my own hand before I raised it against you." "How do I know?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Victor said he loved me too." "I am not claiming to love you," Dante said, though the intensity in his eyes suggested otherwise. "I am claiming to see you." Victor saw a possession. "I see," he trailed off, struggling for the words. "I see fire, buried under ash, but still burning." He reached out, taking her hand. He placed it on his bare chest, right over his heart. It was beating heavy and slow. "You are terrified," he murmured. "I can feel it." "Yes. Tell me to stop, and I will never touch you again." Elena looked at his scars. She looked at the way he held her hand, not crushing it, but cradling it. She felt the heat radiating from him, a different kind of heat than the anger she was used to. It was a magnetic pull, a gravity she couldn't resist. "Don't stop," she breathed. Dante let out a breath that sounded like a surrender. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her waist. This time, he didn't kiss her immediately. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. "Elena!" He groaned against her skin. The kiss, when it came, was slow. It was an exploration. Dante treated her as if she were made of glass, yet his passion was undeniable. He kissed her mouth, her jaw, the pulse point of her throat. Elena's hands moved up his bare chest, tracing the scar on his shoulder. She felt the ridge of the old wound. It made him real. It made him human. "You're scared?" she whispered, pulling back to look at him. "We both are," he replied. He lifted her effortlessly, placing her on the edge of the bed. He knelt between her legs, his hands resting on her thighs over the silk. He looked up at her with a vulnerability that shattered her heart. He wasn't the boss here. He was a man asking for permission. Elena nodded. He untied the robe. The silk pooled around her. Dante looked at her body, at the fading bruises on her ribs, the thinness of her frame, with a look of profound sorrow and worship. He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to the purple mark on her side, then another, and another. Elena gasped, her head falling back. He was kissing her pain. He was claiming her scars, replacing the memory of violence with the sensation of his lips. When he finally moved over her, skin against skin. It wasn't a conquest. It was a desperate, slow-burning connection. Every movement was checked, every touch calibrated to give pleasure, to reassure. Elena cried out softly, not in fear, but in release. For the first time in years, she wasn't bracing for impact. She was floating. They moved together in the quiet dark, the city outside forgotten. It was raw and honest, a conversation without words where they traded pieces of their souls. Later, the room was silent again. Dante slept deeply, one arm thrown heavily over his eyes, the other draped protectively across Elena's waist. Elena lay awake, watching him. The moonlight traced the sharp line of his jaw. He looked younger in his sleep, less dangerous. She felt a tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was something far more dangerous. She reached out, her fingers hovering over his face, wanting to smooth the furrow between his brows, but she pulled back. She couldn't afford this. She couldn't afford to care for a man who lived by the gun. If she stayed, she would only be a target. If she stayed, she would watch him die, or he would watch her die. A tear slipped down her cheek and soaked into the expensive pillowcase. "Don't fall for me," she whispered into the darkness, the words barely a breath. "Please, Dante, don't fall for me." She turned away, curling into a ball, knowing that it was already too late, for both of them. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a blinding, headache-inducing brightness that seemed to mock the shadows lingering in the corners of the penthouse. Elena woke before Dante, her body stiff, her mind already racing with the repercussions of what she had done. She had slept with a crime boss. She had sought shelter in the arms of a man who solved problems with bullets and blackmail. She slid out from under his heavy arm, moving like a ghost. When Dante woke 20 minutes later, he found her fully dressed in the clothes she had arrived in, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked like a statue made of tension. Dante sat up, the sheet pooling at his waist. He did not rub sleep from his eyes. He was instantly alert, his gaze sharpening on her silhouette. He sensed the retreat immediately, the woman who had unraveled beneath him in the dark, who had whispered his name like a prayer, was gone. In her place was the frightened fugitive from the alley. "You are dressed," Dante said, his voice rough with morning gravel. Elena didn't turn. "I need to go." Dante stood and pulled on a pair of lounge pants, walking to the kitchen to start the espresso machine. The domesticity of the action clashed violently with the tension in the room. "Go where, Elena? The offer of protection stands. The threat has not changed." "I have changed," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were dry, rimmed with red. "I can't stay here, playing house in a tower while my life falls apart downstairs. I am not your girlfriend, Dante, and I am not your prisoner." Dante leaned against the marble counter, crossing his arms. His chest ached with a strange, hollow feeling he refused to name. "You are correct. You are not a prisoner. The elevator code is on the counter. You are free to leave whenever you wish." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But know this. Victor Salas is not a man who forgets. If you walk out that door without my men, you are walking into a grave." Elena flinched, but she held her ground. She opened her mouth to argue, to tell him she could take care of herself, but the vibration of the burner phone in her pocket stopped her. She turned away quickly, feigning a cough, and pulled the phone out. Shielding the screen from his view, there was a new message, an image file. Her thumb hovered over the button. She pressed it. The photo was grainy, taken in a dim basement, It showed Rosa. Her cousin was tied to a wooden chair, her mouth gagged with dirty cloth, her eyes wide with terror. There was a fresh bruise blooming on her cheekbone. Below the image, the text read, "Come home, or she dies. Tonight, alone." The blood drained from Elena's face so fast she nearly collapsed. The room spun. Rosa, they had Rosa, because she had run. Because she had been selfish enough to hide in Dante's bed while Victor hunted down the only family she had left. "Elena?" Dante's voice was closer now, concerned. She shoved the phone back into her pocket, forcing air into her lungs. She couldn't tell him. If Dante knew, he would send an army. He would turn the city into a war zone, and in the crossfire, Victor would kill Rosa just to spite him. This had to be done quietly. It had to be a trade. Her life for Rosa's. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice sounding brittle. She plastered a fake, trembling smile on her face. I feel stifled. I need air. Real air, not filtered AC." Dante studied her. He saw the tremor in her hands, the dilated pupils. He knew she was lying. He had made a career out of spotting liars, but he also knew that if he pushed her now, she would shatter. "You want to go out, ma?" he stated flatly. "Just for an hour," Elena said, grabbing her purse. "I need to walk. I need to buy things, toiletries. I can't wear the same clothes forever. I can have anything you desire brought here." "No!" She said it too loudly, then lowered her voice. "Please, I need to feel normal. Just for an hour." Dante stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. He saw the desperation, and he misread it. He thought she was running from him, from the intimacy they had shared. He thought she was terrified of the connection, just as he was. "Very well," Dante said, turning back to the coffee machine. He did not look at her. "Go." Elena didn't wait. She bolted for the door, guilt gnawing at her stomach. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone. Dante waited until the heavy oak door clicked shut. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Luca," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "She is leaving the building. 2 tails. Do not let her spot you. If anyone approaches her, put them on the ground." The city was loud, chaotic, and indifferent to her panic. Elena walked fast, her head down, weaving through the mid-morning crowds on Fifth Avenue. She checked her reflection in store windows, looking for Victor's men, but she saw no one. She ducked into a subway station, taking a train 3 stops downtown, then switching lines. She was trying to shake a tail she wasn't even sure she had. Finally, she emerged in the Lower East Side and found a payphone. She didn't trust the burner phone anymore. She dialed the number of the one person she trusted besides Rosa, Sarah, a nurse she had worked with at the diner before Sarah finished her degree. "Meet me," Elena whispered. "The coffee shop on Delancey. Please." 20 minutes later, Elena sat in the back booth of a grimy coffee shop, gripping a paper cup so hard the cardboard buckled. When Sarah walked in, looking tired in her scrubs, Elena nearly wept. "Elena!" Sarah slid into the booth, her eyes scanning Elena's face. "Jesus, you look like hell. Everyone has been asking about you. Victor was at the diner yesterday. He grabbed the manager by the throat." "I need help." "Sarah," Elena said, leaning in, "I need a place. Not a shelter, somewhere off the books. Somewhere nobody looks. For Rosa." "Rosa? I thought she was in Jersey." "He has her," Elena choked out. "I have to trade myself for her. But once I do, once he has me, I need to know someone will get her out. I need you to be ready to pick her up when he drops her." Sarah stared at her, horrified. "Elena, you can't go back to him. He will kill you. He'll kill her if I don't. Then go to the police, or go to that guy, the one people talk about, the one who runs the docks." "I can't," Elena said, tears spilling over. "I can't drag anyone else into this." She was about to say more when the bell above the door jingled. Elena looked up instinctively. 2 men in leather jackets walked in. They didn't look like customers. They looked like trouble. One of them had a scar running through his eyebrow, one of Victor's enforcers. They spotted her immediately. "There," the scarred man said. Elena didn't think. She reacted. "Run!" she screamed at Sarah. Elena scrambled over the booth, knocking over the coffee. She bolted for the kitchen door as the men lunged. She burst into the alleyway behind the shop, her heels slipping on the grease-stained pavement. She sprinted toward the street, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A gray sedan screeched around the corner, blocking her path. The back door flew open. Victor wasn't inside, but 3 more of his men were. "Get in the car, bitch!" one of them shouted, racking the slide of a pistol. Elena froze. She was trapped. The alley wall behind her, the car in front. She raised her hands, trembling. "I'm sorry, Rosa," she thought. Suddenly, a black SUV roared into the alley from the opposite end, moving with reckless, terrifying speed. It didn't brake. It smashed into the side of the gray sedan with a sickening crunch of metal and shattering glass. The impact spun the sedan around. The gunman was thrown to the pavement. 2 men jumped out of the black SUV. Elena recognized them instantly, the silent guards from the penthouse lobby. They moved with military precision. One kicked the gun away from the fallen man while the other leveled a submachine gun at the driver of the sedan. "Get down!" one of Dante's men roared at Elena. She dropped to her knees, covering her head as chaos erupted. There was no gunfire, just the brutal sounds of a fistfight as the driver tried to exit the wreck and was met with the stock of a rifle. Within 30 seconds, it was over. Victor's men were groaning on the ground or unconscious. The rear door of the SUV opened. "Miss Marquez," the guard said, his voice calm but urgent. "Get in, now!" Elena scrambled into the back seat, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The SUV reversed out of the alley, tires smoking, leaving the wreckage behind. She sat in the leather seat, hugging her knees, staring at the blood smeared on her jeans, not hers. She realized it was from where she had knelt in the alley. "Does he know?" Elena whispered. The driver looked at her in the rearview mirror. "The boss. He's the one who told us to ram the car." The ride back to the penthouse was silent and suffocating. When the elevator doors opened directly into the residence, Dante was waiting. He did not look like the lover from the night before. He looked like a warlord. He had shed his jacket, his sleeves rolled up, his tie gone. A glass of whiskey sat on the table, untouched. Elena stepped out, her hair messy, a bruise forming on her arm where she had hit the booth, dirt on her knees. Dante looked her over, checking for blood. When he saw she was whole, the relief in his eyes was instantly replaced by a fury so cold it burned. "Leave us," he commanded the guards. They vanished instantly, the elevator doors sealing shut. "You lied to me," Dante said. His voice was quiet, which made it worse. "You looked me in the eye and lied." "I had to," Elena pleaded, stepping forward. "I couldn't let you. You almost died," Dante roared. The sudden explosion of volume made her jump. He grabbed the whiskey glass and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the far wall, shards of crystal raining down like diamonds. "Do you understand what happens if they take you?" Dante stalked toward her, stopping inches away. He was vibrating with rage. "Do you have any idea what a man like Salas does to a traitor? He doesn't just kill you. Elena, he breaks you slowly." "He has Rosa," Elena screamed back, the truth finally ripping out of her. Dante froze. "What?" Elena fumbled for her phone with shaking hands. She brought up the picture and shoved it at his chest. Look at what he did. He sent this morning. He said if I didn't come back, he would kill her. I was trying to save her. Dante, I was going to trade myself." Dante took the phone. He looked at the image of the girl tied to the chair. He looked at the bruise on her face. He looked at the terror in her eyes. His anger didn't vanish, but it shifted. It stopped being directed at Elena and turned into a focused, laser-like intent directed at the world outside. He lowered the phone slowly. He looked at Elena, at the dirt on her face, the desperation in her posture. She was willing to walk into a slaughterhouse to save her family. She was willing to die. "You foolish, brave girl," he whispered. "I can't let her die." Elena sobbed, her strength finally giving out. She collapsed, her legs giving way. Dante caught her. He didn't let her hit the floor. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her against his chest as she wept. He carried her to the sofa and sat down, keeping her on his lap, rocking her slightly as she cried out the terror she had been holding in all day. "He will not touch her," Dante vowed. his lips pressed against her temple. "I swear to you on my mother's grave, Victor Salas will not take another breath of freedom. I will burn his world down around him. He wants me," she wept. "He only wants me. He wants leverage," Dante corrected, "and he just made the last mistake of his life." Night fell, but the penthouse was no longer quiet. Dante had spent hours on the phone, barking orders in rapid-fire Italian and English. He was mobilizing. He was calling in debts. Elena had showered, scrubbing the alley dirt from her skin until she was pink and raw. She wore one of Dante's shirts, the hem hitting her mid-thigh. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, but the panic had been replaced by a strange, numb trust. Dante had taken the burden. He hadn't kicked her out. He hadn't yelled at her for being stupid. He had caught her. She walked into the bedroom. The lights were dim. Dante was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at a map of the city spread out on the duvet. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes were deeper. He looked up when she entered. He folded the map and set it on the nightstand. "Come here," he said softly. Elena walked to him. She climbed into the bed, but she didn't lie down. She moved until she was kneeling in front of him, just as he had knelt before her the night before. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. She was shaking again, but not from fear. It was the aftershock of adrenaline. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I lied." Dante wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her tight against him. "Do not apologize for trying to save your blood, but promise me one thing. Anything. Trust me," he said, pulling back to look at her. "Trust me to be the monster so you do not have to be." Elena looked at him. She saw the violence in him. Yes. But she also saw fierce, unyielding protection. She saw a man who would stand between her and hell itself. "I trust you," she said, and she meant it. She kissed him. It wasn't hesitant like the morning, or frantic like the alley. It was an outpouring of gratitude and need. She needed to feel him. She needed to know he was solid, that he was here. Dante groaned, pulling her down onto the mattress with him. He rolled so he was hovering over her, shielding her body with his own. "Nobody is ever going to touch you again," he whispered against her lips. "Only me. Just me." He kissed her deeply, his hands moving over her body with a possessive, reverent slowness. He didn't rush. He treated the act like a ritual. When he pushed the shirt up, his fingers grazed the old, yellowing bruise on her ribs where Victor had kicked her. Dante paused. He lowered his head and pressed his lips to the spot, lingering there, breathing warm air against the damaged skin. Elena arched her back, a ragged sigh escaping her throat. "Dante." He moved lower, kissing the small scar on her hip, then back up, kissing the tension out of her jaw, the worry from her brow. He was worshiping the evidence of her survival. He was rewriting the map of her body, erasing the pain with pleasure. They moved together with a slow, agonizing intensity. There was no frantic grappling, only a deep, rhythmic connection that felt like an anchor dropping in a storm. Elena clung to his shoulders, her nails digging in, anchoring herself to him. For the first time, she didn't close her eyes. She watched him. She watched the way his face tightened with pleasure, the way his eyes stayed locked on hers, intense and unwavering. He wanted her to see him. He wanted her to know exactly who was loving her. When the end came, it was a release so powerful it left them both breathless, tangled together in the sheets, their hearts beating in a synchronized, thunderous rhythm. Dante rolled to his side, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, his arm locking her against him like a steel band. "Sleep," he commanded softly. "I have the watch." And for the first time in 2 years, Elena closed her eyes and slept without dreaming of running. The war room in the basement of the penthouse was a fortress of steel and silence, smelling of cold air conditioning and stale tobacco. A large map of the city was spread across the central table, weighed down by heavy crystal tumblers and loaded magazines. Dante stood at the head of the table, his face a mask of concentrated fury. He was plotting a way to kill a man, a task he had performed before, but never with this much riding on the outcome. Salas is paranoid, Dante said, his voice low. He is hiding in the shadows because he knows every syndicate in the city wants his head. He will not come out for money. He will not come out for threats. He needs a lifeline. Standing to Dante's right was Enzo, a lieutenant who managed the organization's less savory digital enterprises. Enzo was a quiet man with nimble fingers and a hard drive full of the city's darkest secrets. "I have what he needs, boss," Enzo said, sliding a black flash drive across the table. The video files from the senator's hotel room. Salas was trying to broker a deal with the Albanians using this leverage before he turned rat. If he thinks he can get this back, he thinks he can buy his way into witness protection with a gold-plated ticket, or sell it to the highest bidder to fund his escape. "It is the carrot," Dante agreed. "We tell him we want to trade, the drive for the girl. He won't believe it." A voice cut through the smoke. Elena stepped out of the shadows near the door. She was wearing black leggings and an oversized sweater, her arms crossed defensively. She looked out of place among the hardened men, yet she did not flinch when they all turned to look at her. "He knows you want to kill him," Elena said, walking to the table. "He knows you won't trade evidence for nothing. He's crazy, Dante, but he isn't stupid." Dante straightened up, his presence filling the room. "This does not concern you. Elena, go back upstairs. It concerns me more than anyone," she snapped, slamming her hand down on the table, right next to a Glock. The sound made Enzo jump. "It is my cousin he has tied up in a basement. It is my life he wants." "And that is why you will be nowhere near the meat," Dante said, his tone final. "We will use a decoy. I will not risk you." "He will know," Elena insisted, her eyes blazing. "He knows how I walk. He knows how I hold myself. If you use a decoy, he will shoot Rosa before he even gets out of the car. He needs to see me." Dante stared at her. The air in the room grew heavy. He admired her fire. It was a stark contrast to the trembling bird he had found in the alley, but it terrified him. "No," Dante said. "Get her out of here." One of the guards moved toward her. Elena glared at him, then back at Dante. She spun on her heel and stormed out, but the echo of her defiance lingered in the room like smoke. An hour later, the strategy session ended. Enzo and the others filed out, leaving only Luca and Dante in the room. Luca began gathering the papers, his movements jerky. He was agitated. "Spit it out," Dante said, not looking up from the map. "The men are talking." "Dante," Luca said, dropping the pretense. "They do not like this. We're going to war with a desperate informant, risking federal heat, risking a street war, all for a girl who isn't family. She is a liability." Dante went very still. He looked up slowly, his eyes dark and dangerous. "She is under my protection. That makes her family." "She is a distraction," Luca argued, stepping forward. "You are not thinking straight. You are making decisions with your heart, not your head. 10 years I have stood by you. Dante, I have never seen you reckless, but this is reckless. If Salas talks to the feds before we get to him, we all go down. And for what? Because you like the way she looks in your sheets?" The sound of the slap echoed like a gunshot. Dante didn't punch him, but he shoved Luca back against the concrete wall, his forearm pressed against Luca's windpipe. It happened so fast, Luca didn't have time to blink. "Careful," Dante snarled, his face inches from his lieutenant's. "You are my right hand, Luca. Do not make me cut you off. I'm trying to save you," Luca wheezed, holding his hands up in surrender. Dante held him there for a long second, his breathing heavy. He felt the rage coiling in his gut, not just at Luca, but at the truth in his words. He was compromised. He knew it, and he didn't care. He released Luca, stepping back and adjusting his cuffs. "If anyone touches her," Dante said, his voice deadly calm, "if anyone looks at her with anything less than respect, they answer to me." "Is that understood?" Luca rubbed his throat, nodding grimly. "Understood, boss." The following afternoon, the sound of gunfire rang out from the private range Dante maintained in the soundproofed cellar of the building. Dante walked down the metal stairs, the smell of cordite stinging his nose. He expected to see one of his soldiers practicing. Instead, he saw Elena. She was wearing noise-canceling earmuffs, her feet planted wide in a stance she had clearly mimicked from the movies. She held a small caliber pistol with both hands, her arms shaking slightly from the weight and the tension. Bang! The shot went wide, hitting the outer ring of the paper target. Bang! Another miss. She let out a frustrated cry and lowered the gun, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She looked exhausted, her hair sticking to her neck, her chest heaving. Dante watched her from the shadows for a moment. A dark, possessive heat uncurled in his stomach. She was not cowering. She was preparing for war. He walked into the light. Elena jumped, spinning around and pointing the gun at the floor instantly. At least she had learned trigger discipline. "You're jerking the trigger," Dante said, walking toward her. Elena pulled the earmuffs down around her neck. "I need to learn. If things go wrong, I won't be helpless again. If things go wrong, I will be there," Dante said. "You can't always be there," she countered. "You weren't there when Victor broke my nose. You weren't there when he took Rosa. I need to know how to stop him." Dante stopped directly behind her. He could smell the gunpowder on her skin, mixed with her own natural scent of vanilla and fear. He reached around her, his large hands covering hers on the grip of the gun. "Relaxing your shoulders," he murmured, his chest pressing against her back. Elena stiffened, then melted slightly into his heat. "Widen your stance," he instructed, his voice a low rumble in her ear. He kicked her heel gently with his boot, forcing her legs further apart. "Ground yourself. You are not just holding the weapon, you are part of it." He guided her arms up. "Breathe in," she inhaled, her ribs expanding against his chest. "Breathe out. Squeeze. Do not pull." Elena squeezed. The gun fired. The bullet punched a hole through the center mass of the target. "Again," Dante ordered. They fired until the magazine was empty. The rhythm of the shots, the smell of the smoke, and the heat of their bodies pressed together created a heady, dangerous atmosphere. Dante wasn't just teaching her, he was arming her. And seeing the lethal intent in her eyes turned his blood to fire. He took the gun from her hands and set it on the bench. Then he spun her around. Elena looked up at him, her eyes wide, pupils dilated from the adrenaline. "I can do this. Dante, you shouldn't have to," he growled. He grabbed her by the waist and hoisted her up onto the shooting bench. She wrapped her legs around him instinctively. The kiss was not gentle. It was rough, fueled by the violence of the gunshots and the terrifying reality of what was coming. Dante kissed her hard, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting the desperation there. Elena kissed him back with equal force, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She needed this, the bruising pressure of his mouth, the possessive grip of his hands on her thighs. It made her feel alive. It made her feel powerful. Dante pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "You are fire, Elena. You are going to burn him alive. I want to watch him burn," she whispered, her voice trembling with a dark rage that matched his own. That night, the fragile peace broke. They were in the living room. The blueprint of the warehouse district was on the coffee table. "No," Dante said, pacing the room. "Absolutely not. It is the only way." Elena stood her ground, blocking his path. "Enzo said it himself. Victor is paranoid. If he sees a convoy of your men, he will run. If he sees me, alone, vulnerable, holding the drive, he will come out. He will come out to kill you," Dante roared, losing his composure. "I am not using you as bait, Elena. I did not pull you out of that alley just to feed you back to the wolf. I am already the bait," she shouted back. "He has Rosa. If we don't give him what he wants, she dies. I don't care about my safety. Dante, I care about hers. I have to be the one to hand it to him. And if he shoots you the moment he sees you," Dante grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. "What then? I watch you die? Is that the plan?" "Then you kill him," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and resolved. "If I die, at least I tried, but if Rosa dies because I was too scared to face him, I will never forgive myself, and I will never forgive you." Dante stared at her. He saw the resolve in her face, Hard as diamond, she would do this with or without him. If he refused, she would run away and try to find Victor herself, and that would certainly get her killed. He let out a long, ragged breath, closing his eyes. He felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his chest. He was the most powerful man in the city, and yet he was powerless to stop this. "Okay," he said, the word tasting like ash. "Okay, we do it your way, but on my terms." He opened his eyes. "You wear a wire, you wear a vest, and my men will be so close they will be breathing the same air as him. If he twitches, if he blinks wrong, we drop him." Elena nodded, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "Okay." The night of the exchange was cold and wet. Rain lashed against the windows of the penthouse, turning the city into a blur of gray and black in the bedroom. Elena stood in front of the full-length mirror. On the bed lay the dress. It was red, blood red. It wasn't the exact dress Victor had forced her to wear. That one was gone, left behind in the ashes of her old life, but it was close enough. Dante had sent a stylist to find something that matched her description. A silk slip dress with a low back and a high slit. It was a dress designed for a woman who owned... Elena's hands shook as she reached for the zipper. Putting it on felt like stepping back into a cage. The silk was cold against her skin. She looked at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked like Victor's girlfriend. She looked like a victim. A wave of nausea rolled over her. She gripped the edges of the vanity, her knuckles turning white. "I can't do this. I can't be her again." The door opened. Dante entered. He was dressed for war, black tactical gear under a long black trench coat. He stopped when he saw her. His eyes swept over the red dress, but there was no lust in his gaze this time. There was only a fierce, protective sorrow. He saw the way she was shaking. He saw the way she was staring at herself with revulsion. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He didn't touch the dress. He didn't touch her waist. He placed his large, warm hands firmly on her bare shoulders, looking at her reflection in the glass. "Elena," he said. She couldn't look at him. She stared at the red silk. "I look like his whore," she whispered. "No," Dante said firmly. He moved one hand to her chin, tilting her head up until she was forced to meet his eyes in the mirror. "Look at me." She looked. "You are wearing a costume," Dante said. "That is all. Underneath this silk, you are the woman who aimed a gun at a target and didn't blink. You are the woman who brought a crime boss to his knees without ever raising a hand." He leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "This dress does not own you. He does not own you. You are walking into that warehouse as a warrior. Elena, you are the Trojan horse." He kissed her forehead, a lingering, sacred pressure that felt like a blessing. "You are not his anymore," he whispered against her skin. "You are mine, and I protect what is mine." Elena took a deep breath. She watched her own pupils dilate in the mirror. She saw Dante standing behind her, a dark shadow of strength. The nausea faded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She wasn't Victor's victim. She was Dante's equal. She reached for the small earpiece on the table and fitted it into her ear. She turned to face him. "Let's go get her," she said. Dante nodded once. He pulled a sleek, compact pistol from his waistband, the one she had trained with, and strapped it into a hidden holster strapped to her inner thigh, hidden beneath the slit of the dress. "If I give the command," he said, looking up at her, "you drop to the ground. Do not hesitate. I won't." They walked out of the penthouse together, the red dress swishing softly around her legs, a splash of blood moving through the shadows, heading toward the violence that waited at the pier. The warehouse on Pier 9 smelled of brine, rotting wood, and the distinct metallic sharpness of impending violence. Rain lashed against the corrugated metal roof, creating a deafening roar that swallowed the sound of the city behind it. Elena stepped out of the car. The red silk dress clung to her legs, instantly soaked by the deluge. She shivered, but not from the cold. The chill that rattled her bones came from the earpiece buzzing faintly in her right ear. "I have eyes on you," Dante's voice came through. low and steady, cutting through the static of the storm. Walk straight. Do not look at the shadows. I am right here. Elena took a breath, inhaling the scent of the harbor. She clutched the small black clutch purse in her hand. Inside was the flash drive, the bait. Strapped to her thigh, cold against her warm skin, was the gun Dante had taught her to use. She walked toward the gaping maw of the warehouse entrance. The darkness inside seemed to breathe, heavy and waiting. I'm going in, she whispered. Steady, Dante replied. We are set. 10 seconds out. Elena stepped across the threshold. The warehouse was cavernous, illuminated only by a few flickering halogen work lights suspended from the rusting catwalks high above. The floor was slick with oil and water leaking from the roof. In the center of the vast, empty space, a single folding chair sat under a pool of yellow light. Victor Sala stood behind it. He looked worse than she remembered. His face was gaunt, his eyes manic and darting. He wore a cheap leather jacket that looked too big for him now, and he held a heavy pistol loosely in his right hand. But Elena's eyes didn't stay on him. They flew to the person in the chair. Rosa! Elena cried out, her voice cracking. Rosa was bound with zip ties, her mouth gagged with duct tape. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but she was alive. She made a muffled, frantic sound when she saw Elena, shaking her head violently. Victor laughed. It was a dry, jagged sound that echoed off the metal walls. Look at you, Victor sneered, stepping into the light. He looked Elena up and down, his gaze lingering on the slit of the red dress with a repulsive familiarity. Dressed up like a high-class whore. Did you wear that for me, baby, or for the new boyfriend? Elena stopped 10 feet away. She forced her spine to straighten. She forced her hands to stop trembling. She remembered the weight of the gun on her leg. She remembered Dante's words. You are the Trojan horse. I wore it for your funeral. Victor, Elena said. Her voice was stronger than she expected, ringing clear through the space. Victor's smirk faltered for a second, then returned, sharper and crueler. He pressed the barrel of his gun against Rosa's temple. Rosa whimpered, squeezing her eyes shut. You got a mouth on you now, Victor said softly. You didn't have a mouth when you were crying on my floor. I'm not on the floor anymore, Elena said. She held up the clutch. I have the drive. Victor, the senator, the hotel room. Everything you need to buy your life back. Victor's eyes greedily tracked the purse. Give it to me. Let her go first. You think you are in a position to negotiate? Victor cocked the hammer of the gun. The click was loud in the silence. I kill her, then I take the drive, then I take you. That is how this ends. You know it. You always knew it. You'll always crawl back to me, Elena. You don't know how to be anything but mine. Elena stared at him. For years, this man had been her god and her devil. He had defined her world. But standing there now, with Dante's voice breathing reassurance in her ear and the steel of a weapon against her skin, she realized something that made her dizzy with relief. He was small. He was just a small, pathetic man with a gun. I would rather die, Elena said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, than ever let you touch me again. High above on the catwalk, concealed in the heavy shadows, Dante watched through the scope of a suppressed rifle. His finger hovered over the trigger. He had a shot, but it was risky. Victor was moving too much, using Rosa's head as a shield. Take the shot, Dante whispered to his sniper team positioned on the east roof. On my mark. 3, 2, bang. A gunshot rang out, but it didn't come from Dante's team. It came from the shadows near the loading dock entrance to the west. One of Dante's men on the ground crumpled, his leg shattered. Ambush! Dante roared into the comms. It's a setup! Move! Move! Chaos erupted instantly. It wasn't a simple exchange. Victor hadn't come alone. He had sold out to a rival syndicate, the Russians, promising them Dante Moretti in exchange for protection. Mercenaries poured out from behind the shipping crates, opening fire on Dante's positions. The warehouse turned into a kill box. Bullets sparked against the metal girders, raining hot shrapnel down on the concrete. Elena, get down, Dante screamed in her ear. Elena dropped to the floor, covering her head as the air filled with the deafening crack of automatic fire. she saw Victor grab Rosa by the hair, dragging the chair backward into the cover of a forklift. "No!" Elena screamed, scrambling forward on her hands and knees. Victor saw her. He abandoned the chair, shoving Rosa over. He lunged for Elena. She tried to reach for the gun on her thigh, but the dress was tangled around her legs. Victor was on her before she could draw. He grabbed her by the hair, wrenching her head back with a force that made white light explode behind her eyes. "You stupid bitch!" Victor screamed over the gunfire. "You brought him here. You think I didn't know?" He hauled her to her feet, using her body as a shield against the bullets flying from the catwalks. He dragged her backward, moving toward a rusted side door that led to the alleyways. "Dante!" Elena screamed. Clawing at Victor's arm, Dante, up on the catwalk, saw them moving. He couldn't shoot. Victor was too close to her. "Cover me," Dante ordered his men. He abandoned the rifle and vaulted over the railing, dropping 15 feet to the top of a shipping container. Then to the ground, he rolled, coming up with a handgun in his grip, and sprinted into the line of fire. Victor kicked the side door open and dragged Elena out into the storm. The rain outside was torrential. The alley was a narrow throat of darkness between two brick buildings, slick with mud and trash. "Walk!" Victor shouted, shoving her forward. He still had his gun pressed to her spine. "We're taking a ride, Elena, and when we get where we are going, I am going to make you wish you died in that warehouse." Elena stumbled, her heels snapping on the uneven pavement. She kicked them off, running barefoot in the freezing slush. Despair clawed at her throat, but beneath it, the anger was finally boiling over. No. She felt the holster against her thigh. She just needed a second. 1 second of separation. "Move!" Victor shoved her again. They reached a chain-link fence. Victor had to use one hand to pull it open. For a fraction of a second, the gun left her spine. Elena spun around. She didn't go for the gun. She didn't have time. She channeled every ounce of rage, every memory of every bruise he had ever given her, and she drove her elbow backward with all her strength. It connected solidly with Victor's nose. There was a sickening crunch. Victor howled, stumbling back, blood gushing from his face. He fired blindly, the bullet striking the brick wall inches from Elena's head. Elena didn't wait. She turned and sprinted down the alley, the red dress flying behind her like a flag of war. "I will kill you!" Victor shrieked, his voice wet and gurgling. He charged after her. He was faster. He was fueled by a manic, drug-induced adrenaline. Elena heard his footsteps splashing closer. She reached for the gun on her thigh, her fingers slipping on the wet silk. She cleared the holster just as Victor tackled her. They hit the pavement hard. The air left Elena's lungs in a painful whoosh. The gun skittered across the wet asphalt, sliding out of reach. Victor was on top of her instantly, his hands closing around her throat. His face was a mask of blood and madness. "Die," he hissed, squeezing. "Just die." Elena clawed at his face, her vision spotting with black dots. The rain pounded against her eyes. She couldn't breathe. She was going to die here, in the mud, looking at the face of the man she hated. Suddenly, Victor was gone. A dark blur had collided with him, tackling him off her with the force of a freight train. Elena gasped, sucking in greedy gulps of air, rolling onto her side. Dante and Victor were rolling in the mud, a tangle of limbs and fury. This was not a cinematic fight. It was ugly, brutal, and desperate. Dante was a skilled fighter, trained to kill, but Victor was fighting for his life. Victor gouged at Dante's eyes, bit his arm, thrashing like a wild animal. Dante took a heavy blow to the jaw that snapped his head back, but he didn't falter. He grabbed Victor by the lapels of his jacket and slammed him into the brick wall. The sound of the impact was sickening. "For the girl," Dante growled, driving a fist into Victor's ribs. Victor slumped, wheezing, but fumbled for a knife in his boot. Dante saw it. He caught Victor's wrist mid-swing. He twisted the arm until the bone snapped. Victor screamed, the knife clattering to the ground. Dante didn't stop. He threw Victor to the ground and straddled him. He rained blows down on Victor's face. Left, right, left, each punch landing with the weight of absolute judgment. Dante's knuckles split open. Blood, his and Victor's, mixed with the rain washing into the gutter. Victor stopped fighting. He lay in the mud, his face a ruin, wheezing through broken teeth. Dante stood up, his chest heaving. He looked down at the man who had terrorized the woman he loved. He drew his backup weapon from his ankle holster and leveled it at Victor's head. "Dante!" The voice stopped him. Elena was standing 5 feet away. She was soaked, shivering, covered in mud, and she was holding the gun she had dropped. She had both hands on the grip, just as he had taught her. She was aiming directly at Victor's heart. "Move," Elena said, her voice dead calm. Dante looked at her. He saw the look in her eyes. It was the 1,000-yard stare. She wasn't seeing Victor. She was seeing every nightmare he had ever given her. She wanted to pull the trigger. She needed to erase him. Victor laughed weakly, coughing up blood. "Do it. Elena, show me you are just like me." Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. "I am nothing like you. Then why do you want to kill me so bad?" Victor gargled. "Elena," Dante said softly. He holstered his own weapon. He stepped between her and Victor. He put his chest directly in front of the barrel of her gun. "Move, Dante," she sobbed, the tears finally mixing with the rain. "He deserves it. He deserves to die." "He does," Dante agreed, walking slowly toward her. "He deserves to die 1,000 times, but you do not deserve to be the one who does it." He reached out, his hand covering the barrel of the gun. He didn't push it down. He just held it. "Look at me," he commanded. Elena looked up at him. Her eyes were wild with pain. "You are light," Dante whispered, ignoring the chaos of the distant sirens that were beginning to wail in the night. "You are fire and survival. You are not a killer. If you pull this trigger, he takes one last thing from you. He takes your soul. Do not give it to him." Elena stared at him. Her hands began to shake. The rage that had sustained her cracked, revealing the exhaustion underneath. "I hate him," she whispered. "I know," Dante said. "Let the law finish him. Let him rot in a cage where he can't hurt you. You won." He gently pried the gun from her fingers. As soon as the weapon was gone, Elena collapsed against him. Dante caught her, wrapping his arms around her mud-slicked body, holding her tight against his chest. He buried his face in her wet hair, breathing her in. She was safe. She was alive. "Rosa?" she mumbled into his coat. "My men have her," Dante promised. "Luca radioed. They pulled her out the back when the shooting started. She is safe." Elena let out a sob of relief, her knees giving way. Then the world turned red and blue. Police cruisers screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the storm. The NYPD had arrived in force, drawn by the automatic gunfire. "Freeze! Police!" a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Dante stiffened. He looked at the cops, then back at the unconscious form of Victor, and finally at Elena. He couldn't be found here. Not with a dead body or a half-dead informant. Not with an illegal firearm. If he was arrested now, his enemies would tear his organization apart, and Elena would be left unprotected in the chaos. He had to run. "Dante," Elena said, gripping his coat as she realized what was happening. He looked down at her. His face was bruised, his knuckles raw, his eyes fierce with an emotion that looked terrifyingly like love. "I have to go," he said urgently. "If I stay, I can't protect you." "No," she pleaded, grabbing his lapels. "Don't leave me. Listen to me," he said, framing her face with his bloodied hands. The rain ran down his wrists. "Tell them everything. Tell them about the drive. Tell them about the trafficking. Put him away forever. Dante." He cut her off by crashing his mouth onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, searing brand. He kissed her like it was the last time he would ever breathe. He kissed her with the taste of blood and rain and promise. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers for one heartbeat. "If they take me," he whispered fiercely, staring into her soul. "Remember this. Remember that you are mine, and I always come back for what is mine. Police, hands up." The shouts were closer. Beams of flashlights cut through the rain. Dante released her. He stepped back into the shadows of the alley, moving with the ghost-like silence of a predator. "Go to them," he commanded. Elena reached for him, but her hand grasped only empty air. Dante Moretti sprinted toward the chain-link fence, vaulting it in a single fluid motion and disappearing into the labyrinth of the night. Elena stood alone in the rain, the red dress clinging to her skin, the sirens wailing around her. She looked down at Victor, broken at her feet. Then she looked at the empty darkness where Dante had been. She raised her hands slowly as the police rushed forward, but her heart was still running with him in the dark. The flashing lights of the police cruisers cut through the darkness of the alley like strobes in a nightmare. The rain continued to fall, washing away the blood on the pavement, but it could not wash away the tension that hung thick in the air. Dante Moretti had run. He had vaulted the fence with the grace of a shadow, disappearing into the labyrinth of the industrial district, but the perimeter was too tight. The New York Police Department had locked down a 4-block radius within minutes of the first shots fired. He made it 2 blocks. He was cornered in a dead-end loading dock by a tactical team. He didn't fight. He didn't raise his hands in surrender either. He simply stopped, leaning against the brick wall, breathing heavily, the adrenaline of the brawl with Victor slowly fading into a cold, hard reality. When they cuffed him, slamming him against the hood of a cruiser, he didn't look at the officers. He looked back toward the pier, his eyes searching the chaos for a glimpse of red silk. He needed to know she was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. The charges, the prison time, the collapse of his empire, it was all noise. If she was breathing, he had won. Back at the warehouse, paramedics were loading a screaming, thrashing Victor Salas into an ambulance. He was handcuffed to the gurney. His face was a ruin of broken bones and swelling, but his spirit was even more fractured. He wasn't screaming in pain. He was screaming accusations, naming names, trying to spill secrets that no longer held any currency. Because while Victor was bleeding in the mud, Luca had been busy. At the exact moment the police arrived, an anonymous server in an internet cafe in Queens, paid for in cash, began uploading terabytes of data to the FBI, the DEA, and 3 major news outlets. The flash drive Elena had carried was just the tip of the iceberg. Luca had emptied the vaults, every bribe Victor had taken, every girl he had trafficked, every ounce of product he had moved for the syndicates. It was all public record now. Victor Salas wasn't just arrested. He was buried. Elena sat in the back of a squad car, a foil blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was shivering, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. A female officer was asking her questions, but Elena couldn't hear her. She was staring out the window, watching as another cruiser sped past. In the back seat of that cruiser, she saw a silhouette, a man with broad shoulders and a head held high, staring straight ahead. Dante. Their eyes didn't meet. The cars were moving too fast, but she felt him. She felt the pull of him like a physical tether snapping taut in her chest. "Miss Marquez?" the officer asked gently. "We need to get you to the hospital. Your cousin is already on her way." Elena blinked, the world rushing back in. Is Victor?" "He's in custody," the officer confirmed. "He's facing federal charges. He won't be hurting anyone ever again." Elena nodded slowly. She pulled the blanket tighter. She was safe. The monster was in a cage, but as the car pulled away, leaving the wet, dark alley behind, she realized that safety felt incredibly cold without the fire that had protected her. The weeks that followed were a blur of sterile rooms and bright fluorescent lights. The witness protection program was efficient, if nothing else. Because of the high-profile nature of the case, a mafia war spilling onto the streets of Brooklyn, a corrupt senator implicated in the files Luca released, the government moved fast. Elena testified in a closed grand jury hearing. She sat in a room with wood-paneled walls and told them everything. She spoke of the abuse. She spoke of the trafficking ring. She spoke of the night in the warehouse. She did not look at Victor, who sat at the defense table, heavily bandaged and silent. She looked at the flag in the corner of the room, and she spoke with a voice that no longer shook. She did not mention Dante's name, not once. When they asked who saved her in the alley, she said it was chaos. She said she didn't see faces. She said she fought Victor off herself. It was a lie, but it was the only truth she was willing to give them. After the testimony, She and Rosa were moved. They were taken out of the city, driven 4 hours north to a quiet, sleepy town near the Canadian border, where the trees were tall and the winters were long. They were given a small, furnished apartment in a complex full of nurses and retirees. They were given new names, new social security numbers, and a monthly stipend to help them get on their feet. It was safe. It was peaceful. It was the life Elena had prayed for during those long, terrified nights in the motel. And she hated it. She hated the silence. She hated the way the wind sounded in the trees. It was too soft, lacking the grit and noise of the city. She hated that nobody looked at her twice. Rosa was doing better. She started therapy 3 times a week, talking to a kind woman with gray hair about the trauma. She was taking art classes at the community center, painting jagged, dark abstracts that slowly, week by week, began to incorporate brighter colors. But Elena wasn't painting. She was waiting. Every night, she sat by the window of their 3rd-floor apartment looking down at the empty parking lot. She had a journal on her lap, a leather-bound book she had bought at the local drugstore. The therapist had suggested writing as a way to process the grief. Day 42, she wrote, "The rain smells different here. It smells like dirt and pine needles. It doesn't smell like exhaust. It doesn't smell like him." She put the pen down. She couldn't write about him. If she wrote about him, it made the absence real. Instead, she reached into the pocket of the heavy wool coat hanging on the back of her chair. It was the only thing she had kept from that night, other than the scars on her skin. Her fingers brushed against a piece of paper. It was soft now, worn thin from being folded and unfolded 100 times. She pulled it out. It was a note, written on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind found in a penthouse suite. He must have slipped it into her coat pocket right before they left for the warehouse, knowing there was a chance he wouldn't come back. She turned on the small lamp and read the handwriting. It was a sharp, angular, aggressive script. "I am not your savior, but I am yours if you want me." Elena traced the ink with her thumb. The words were a lifeline. They were an anchor holding her to the earth when she felt like she was drifting into the gray fog of her new life. "I want you," she whispered to the empty room. "I want you so much it hurts." But Dante was in a cell in Manhattan, awaiting trial for assault, possession of an illegal firearm, and a laundry list of RICO predicates the district attorney was trying to pin on him. He was gone, and she was here, safe, whole, and completely alone. Manhattan Criminal Court, Part 74. Dante Moretti stood before the judge. He had been in custody for 2 months. He had lost 15 pounds. His suit hung slightly loose on his frame, but his posture was as rigid as iron. The district attorney looked frustrated. He was sweating. "Your Honor," Dante's lawyer began, "a man who cost more per hour than the judge made in a month. The prosecution has absolutely no physical evidence linking my client to the assault on Victor Salas, Mr. Salas, a known perjurer and federal informant with a history of mental instability. Claims my client beat him. However, the DNA evidence at the scene was compromised by the heavy rainfall and the chaotic nature of the police arrival. No weapon was found on my client's person at the time of arrest. He was fleeing the scene," the DA argued. "He was fleeing a firefight initiated by foreign nationals," the lawyer countered smoothly. "My client was a bystander caught in a gang war. The gun found in the alley had no prints. The witnesses, Ms. Marquez and her cousin, have vanished into the system and provided no testimony implicating Mr. Moretti. You have nothing but the words of a human trafficker against a businessman." The judge rubbed his temples. He knew who Dante was. Everyone knew. But the law was a machine, and the machine needed fuel. Without Elena's testimony, without the gun, without DNA that wasn't washed away by the storm, the case was hollow. "Case dismissed," the judge muttered, banging the gavel. "Mr. Moretti, you're free to go. But watch your step. Next time, we won't miss it." Dante didn't smile. He didn't look relieved. He simply nodded once, turned on his heel, and walked out of the courtroom. Luca was waiting for him on the steps of the courthouse. The lieutenant looked tired, but he managed a grin when he saw his boss. "The car is here," Luca said, opening the door of a silver sedan. "Welcome back to the world, Dante." Dante slid into the back seat. He didn't ask about business. He didn't ask about the Russians or the shipping routes or the money lost while he was inside. "Find her," Dante said. Luca froze, his hand on the door. He looked at Dante. He saw the hollows under his eyes, the way his hands were clenched into fists on his knees. He saw a man who had walked through hell and came out carrying only one desire. "Dante," Luca said softly. "She is in protection. The feds have her buried deep. Even if I could find her. Maybe it is better this way. She is safe. She is out of her life." Dante turned his head. His gaze was terrifying. "I did not ask for your opinion. Luca, I asked for a location. If you cannot give it to me, I will tear this country apart brick by brick until I find her myself." Luca sighed. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It took me 4 weeks, Luca admitted. A contact in the marshal's office owed a gambling debt, upstate, a town called Oakhaven. Dante took the paper. His hand trembled. "Just once. Drive," he said. It was raining in Oakhaven. It was a cold, miserable rain that turned the streets into rivers of slush. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the window frames of the apartment complex. Elena sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to read a book. The words swam on the page. She couldn't concentrate. She felt a strange restlessness tonight, a prickling on the back of her neck that she hadn't felt since New York. Rosa was asleep in the other room. The apartment was quiet. Then there was a knock at the door. Elena froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Nobody knocked at this hour. The few neighbors she knew were elderly. The landlord only came during the day. She stood up, the book sliding to the floor with a thud. She walked slowly toward the door. Her hand went instinctively to the kitchen counter, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet, old habits. She crept to the peephole and looked out. She stopped breathing. The hallway light was dim, buzzing with a dying bulb. But there was no mistaking the man standing there. He was soaked to the bone. His black coat was heavy with water, dripping onto the cheap welcome mat. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted, bruised, thinner, older than she remembered. There was a healing cut on his cheekbone and dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights in a concrete cell. He didn't knock again. He just stood there, staring at the wood as if he could see through it. Elena dropped the skillet. It clattered loudly on the linoleum. She fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers shaking so hard she could barely turn the latch. She threw the chain off. She ripped the door open. Dante looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across the threshold. Two ghosts reuniting in the land of the living. Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the toll the last few months had taken. She saw the violence he had endured for her. She saw the man who had walked into a warehouse to die for her. "I thought you would be gone forever," she whispered, her voice breaking into a sob. Dante took a step forward. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't check the perimeter. He just reached for her. "I told you," he rasped, his voice rough with emotion. He raised his hands, cupping her face. His palms were cold from the rain, but they burned against her skin. "I told you, Elena, if I am breathing, I will find you." Elena let out a cry that was half laugh, half sob. She threw herself at him. She collided with his chest, burying her face in his soaked coat. She smelled the rain, the wool, and beneath it all, the scent of sandalwood and steel that was uniquely him. Dante wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground, crushing her to him. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply, shaking with the force of his relief. He had found her. She was real. She was warm. "You're here," she wept into his shoulder. "You're actually here. I'm here," he murmured against her hair. "I'm not going anywhere. Never again." He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His eyes searched her face, cataloging every inch, making sure she was whole. He thumbed away the tears tracking down her cheeks. "Did you read it?" he asked softly. "The note?" Elena nodded, sniffing. Every night. I'm not your savior. Dante shook his head. I was wrong. I don't want to be your savior, Elena. I just want to be the man who stands beside you in the dark. Then stand with me, she whispered. Please? Dante didn't answer with words. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss of the alley. It wasn't the goodbye kiss of the warehouse. This was a homecoming. He kissed her with a deep, aching tenderness that swept away the months of separation. His lips were cool, but his mouth was hot, demanding and giving in equal measure. Elena gripped his soaked collar, pulling him closer, anchoring him to her. The light from the hallway framed their silhouettes. The powerful, broken king and the queen who had learned to fight. The rain hammered against the roof, a symphony for their reunion. They were two scarred souls, carrying the weight of their pasts, the bruises of their battles, and the secrets of a city far away. But as Dante kicked the door shut behind him, sealing out the cold world and locking them in together, they both knew the truth. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante and Elena, from the shadows of Brooklyn to their emotional reunion in the rain. It has been a pleasure bringing these characters to life for you. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more passionate, gritty, and emotional tales, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. Did you like the ending? What was your favorite part? I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in love, even in the shadows.